151 creatures weren't enough. The Pokémon world as well as its creatures were bound to expand to new horizons. And that moment arrived in 1999, when Japan saw the release of Pokémon Gold and Silver. 100 new creatures to catch and a whole new region to explore were the scenarios for what's considered one of the best pairs of Pokémon games ever released. In the same fashion as the Gen 1 video, this Iceberg will cover Pokémon Gold, Silver and Crystal, as well as the remakes on Nintendo DS and Pokémon Stadium 2. Welcome to the Pokémon Gold, Silver and Crystal Iceberg.
Say my name. Eisenberg. You're goddamn right.
Ruins of Alph. The Ruins of Alph always held some mystery to me. The music, the isolation, and the presence of Pokémon such as Unknown gave me a feeling of unease. The name Alph comes from the word alphabet, the shape the Pokémon Unknown resemble. These mysterious and ancient Pokémon are generally depicted on walls, and according to their Pokédex entries, nobody knows if language and letters are based on this Pokémon or vice versa. Within these ancient ruins, there are several puzzles the player must solve in order to gain access to the different types of Unknown. There are some mysterious messages in the form of these Pokémon that read the following. Our words shall remain here for the ages, our clan engraved words in this place. Thus we shall erect a Pokémon statue outside. Our clan created Pokémon statue outside. We humans must learn to walk in harmony with them. We depart for their sakes. We humans need to walk with them. We live here for the sake of them. They possess great insight and refuse the outside world. They possess power to sense with mind and reject outside. Red. One of the greatest legendary trainers of all time, Red is a force to be reckoned with, and once conquered all challenges and climbed the summit of Mount Silver, the player must face the ultimate challenge. Facing Red is somehow facing ourselves when it comes to those who played and finished any Gen 1 adventure. Red is mysterious as he is a silent character, and once defeated, he vanishes from the place right before the credits play. This led people to speculate that Red was a spirit, or that he had died at some point, especially considering that his mother in Pallet Town says that he has been away for a long time, and that he hasn't called, so she has no idea where Red is or what he's doing. This, however, is easily disproven, as in future games we can see Red doing just fine, like in Pokémon Sun and Moon. Shiny Pokémon. Shiny Pokémon are probably one of the most popular elements in the whole Pokémon universe. Back then, these creatures weren't fully understood, and our only contact with them was the red Gyarados at the Lake of Rage, which was programmed to always be a shiny red Gyarados. However, not many of us knew that it was possible for all Pokémon to have a different color, especially because the chances of encountering one were 1 in 8,192. I remember having spent hundreds of hours playing Pokémon Gold, and never was I able to encounter a single shiny Pokémon besides the red Gyarados, and it took me a full generation to realize their existence when I encountered a shiny Phanpy in Pokémon Sapphire. Nowadays they are not as rare, but back then they were the cradle of myths. People even coined the term shiny hunting to refer to the activity of encountering and capturing these rare creatures. It's generally done, at least with stationary legendary Pokémon, by engaging in battle with them. If they're not shiny, they would reset the game. Some people might be lucky, soft reset a couple of times and get a shiny. But other less fortunate would push it to the limit and soft reset tens of thousands of times to get a shiny Pokémon. Unknown Radio Station. It's not very common to tune in to the radio when you're in some ancient ruins, but when you do, you might find something weird like at the Ruins of Alph. For some strange reason, if you listen to the Pokégear radio close or inside the ruins on channel 13.5, you'll hear a mysterious transmission which is theorized to be produced by the Unknown. It is unknown if these signals have any meaning at all, but some of those noises are actually Ho-Oh's distorted cries and the melody of the Azure flute. This has made people wonder if there is some kind of connection between Arceus and the unknown. We will see a little bit of this possible connection later on. The legendary beast's origin. Many years prior to the main game's story, a lightning bolt struck Bell Tower and engulfed it in flames, killing 3 nameless Pokémon we now know as Raikou, Entei and Suicune. However, before being resurrected by Ho-Oh, they weren't legendary. A lot of people think that the Pokémon that eventually turned into legendary beasts were Jolteon, Flareon and Vaporeon, and there are a couple of claims to support this. Probably the most obvious comparison is the type similarities that both sets of trios share, as well as physical appearances. Raikou and Jolteon are both yellow electric types, Entei and Flareon are red fire types, and Suicune and Vaporeon are blue water type Pokémon. Raikou, Entei and Suicune also have hidden abilities introduced in Generation 5 that mirror those of Jolteon, Flareon and Vaporeon's normal abilities, Volt Absorb, Flash Fire and Water Absorb respectively. It's likely that they were given the same hidden abilities as the evolutions in Generation 5 and onward as a nod to this theory. Both sets of trios also have similar stats. Jolteon and Raikou have high speed and high special attacks, Flareon and Entei have a high attack stat, and Vaporeon and Suicune are tanky Pokémon. Furthermore, the 5 kimono girls in the same city as the Burnt Tower own an evolution. In the Pokémon Generations anime, silhouettes are shown of the nameless Pokémon that perish in the tower's fire. While this episode has been used to debunk this legendary trio origin theory, it's also likely that the silhouettes are ambiguous, simply to symbolize that the fact that the Pokémon that were consumed in the fire were never named. Triple question mark type. The triple question mark type is a type that exists only in Generations 2, 3 and 4. This type is neutrally effective against all types, and all types are neutrally effective against it. An interesting case linked to this type was that of Arceus, as it also has a triple question mark type in all Generation 4 games, although impossible to access without the use of cheats. The only move of this type is Curse, a move that became Ghost type from Generation 5 onward to simplify matters. It was never known why such type that was assigned to a single non-damaging move was of this type in the first place. There might have been a mechanic intended to appear in the future, but we might never know. Berserk Gene. It's known that many items have been carried on from previous generations, but as far as I know, there's one that only appeared in Pokémon Gold, Silver and Crystal, and that is the Berserk Gene. The Berserk Gene raises attack by 2 stages, but it confuses the user and it's basically a self-induced swagger. Found close to Cerulean Cave, this item is a nod to Mewtwo. With the use of cheat codes, if you make Mewtwo appear in the wild, the game is programmed for the legendary Pokémon to always hold this Generation 2 exclusive item. Safari Zone. The Safari Zone is one of the most iconic locations in Pokémon games, as many of the regions of the Pokémon world have one. However, it was disappointing to find out that the Safari Zone was inaccessible due to the warden taking a trip. Most probably the Safari Zone was removed due to a lack of space in the game. While most Pokémon never escape during a wild battle, there are a couple of them that are programmed to have a chance of fleeing, such as Heracross, Phanpy, Tangela, and Teddiursa. It's interesting to notice that some of these Pokémon have appeared in other Safari Zones, so it's theorized that this Pokémon could have appeared in the Gen 2 Safari Zone. SINJOH Ruins. The SINJOH Ruins are a very special place, as they sit in a location that is not part of any officially known region. The name is a combination of Sinnoh and Johto, and it's stated that it's so because, in the past, the cultures of Sinnoh and Johto were connected. Maybe this also implies that both regions share a border to the north, as shown in the map when the player is in those ruins. Once you are in the SINJOH Ruins, if you take Arceus to the Mystery stage, he will be able to create one of the 3 legendary dragons from the Sinnoh region. This is interesting, as apparently, in order to do this, a large group of unknown is required to make one of the 3 eggs appear. This has led people to believe that there is a deeper connection between Arceus and this psychic Pokémon. Also, the shape of Arceus's golden cross-like wheel might seem similar to some unknown letters, but this similarity might just be a coincidence. Team Rocket mysterious radio signal. Besides the unknown radio signal at the ruins of Alph, there's a weird signal if we tune in to the radio at the Lake of Rage during Team Rocket's invasion. Take a listen. Pokémon Stadium 2 Shiny Pokémon. We know shiny Pokémon are differently colored Pokémon, but some of the ones we see in Pokémon Stadium 2 are radically different from what they intended to look in the Game Boy Color. Take for example this Scyther. It's not very different from the original one, as it only changes on some spots that are colored orange. Now take a look at this shiny Scyther from Pokémon Stadium 2. It's completely red as if it were a scissor, and like this, many other Pokémon had completely different shiny forms. This would also happen with shiny Pokémon in Pokémon Colosseum, in which even Pokémon that already had an established color in Stadium 2 were completely different in Colosseum and XD, but we'll leave that for the Ruby, Sapphire and Emerald Iceberg. Shiny Pokémon in Challenge Cup. Talking about shinies, something that wasn't known at the time happened to the speedrunner Worcester during a Pokémon Stadium 2 run. Take a look.
This guy has a shiny. That was a legit shiny.
As you can see, nobody really knew that shiny Pokémon could be encountered in the game, but due to the random nature of the Challenge Cup, it seems it also implies that any Pokémon can be shiny. Shiny Locked Pokémon. This term refers to any Pokémon whose shiny form is unobtainable during normal gameplay and without the use of cheating devices. Although this concept wasn't used until Generation 5, when Zekrom, Reshiram and Victini were impossible to obtain in their shiny form, two Pokémon in Generation 2 were unobtainable in spite of them having a shiny sprite programmed into the game, those being Unknown and Mew. As far as I know, unknown shapes depend on IVs or individual values, numbers that determine how strong Pokémon are, and in the case of this Pokémon, the letters of the alphabet they can be. Interestingly enough, the only unknown shapes that can be shiny are letters I or V. In contrast to Unknown, which can be found in the wild, Mew being a mythical Pokémon is nowhere to be found in Pokémon Gold, Silver and Crystal. As I mentioned in my previous video, there are ways to catch Pokémon in Gen 1 that when transferred to Gen 2 can be shiny. This will depend on their IVs, however, every Mew that was given away in Nintendo events had very specific IVs that would never generate a shiny Mew, therefore rendering shiny Mew completely unobtainable. HeartGold and SoulSilver prediction. Japanese Pokémon fans were able to predict the official announcement of Pokémon HeartGold and SoulSilver. During the Pokémon Sunday TV show in Japan, they teased a big announcement for the following week, but what made fans theorize about these remakes were two gold and silver confetti-filled balls. As expected, HeartGold and SoulSilver would be revealed the next week. Pokémon Lost Silver. The story begins with somebody who bought a copy of Pokémon Silver at a GameStop. When he turned on the game, he realized that the game was glitching and that it had a save file with maxed out playtime, money and a complete Pokédex. Nonetheless, the strangest thing is that the player had some unknown that would display creepy messages throughout the game, as well as a Cyndaquil in his party. As the player makes progress, he comes across strange messages, including some spelled out by the unknown in his party. For example, spelling out "he died", referring to his Cyndaquil who out of nowhere disappears from his party. He then shows up in a room with several gravestones, from which he appears to descend to some hellish dimension, where a shiny Celebi with the Move Perish song appears in his team, as well as unknown spelling out "dying". Also, There are several NPC characters with a ghostly appearance. He then finds Red standing at the end of the road and battles him. His sprite looks like a ghost and sends out a Pikachu with a sad face. Given that Celebi's only move is Perish Song, the only 2 Pokemon on the field are destined to perish. After the battle ends, the player ends up at his home with a party of unknowns spelling out "No more." As he exits the place, the player appears to become a ghost. After moving around, he finds his alive self who tells him goodbye forever. In the final part of the game, he ends up in a graveyard and the unknown in his party spell out "I'm dead." This creepypasta was made into a playable file and then uploaded to YouTube, where it has received more than 1 million views and has become one of the most popular Pokémon creepypastas. Giovanni's Demise. There are several special events in the remakes, one of them being the Celebi event, in which by approaching the Ilex Forest Shrine with a faithful encounter Celebi as the player's walking Pokemon, Celebi will take the player back in time 3 years in the past, in which we can see Giovanni and his son Silver having a conversation after Red defeated Team Rocket. After that, Celebi takes the player to the Tojo Falls, in a time when the Goldenrod radio tower is being taken over by Team Rocket. In this place, we can fight Giovanni and prevent him from reuniting with Team Rocket in Johto. After his defeat, Giovanni will exit the cave, but what's eerie is the sound that plays moments after he exits. Some people speculate that the sound is that of a body splashing on water, suggesting that, after being defeated by a kid once again and ruining his dreams, Giovanni would attempt to take his own life by jumping from the waterfalls of the cave. Other people think that the sound is that of the radio in the cave and instead state that Giovanni is alive because he appears in the Pokémon World Tournament in Pokémon Black and White 2, and also as the main villain in the Rainbow Rocket episode in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. However, it's likely that the Pokémon World Tournament is not a canon event, and the Giovanni we see in the Gen 7 games that was able to defeat Red and catch Mewtwo is one from a parallel world. This is only speculation, as nothing official has been confirmed so far. Vietnamese Crystal. Pocket Monsters Crystal version, also known as Pokémon Vietnamese Crystal, is a bootlegged version of Pokémon Crystal. Translated from the original Japanese to Chinese and from Chinese to English, the dialogue in the game is often nonsensical and unintentionally humorous. All Pokemon, characters, and location names are similarly badly translated, often resembling romanizations of Chinese transliterations of the Japanese names. The translation is so poor that the game has achieved a cult status and is the subject of many popular internet memes. It was made popular by various Let's Play video series on YouTube, with the most notable one being by Delicious Cinnamon. Something to take into account is that Pokemon aren't even called Pokemon, but are referred to as elves throughout the game. Here are some dialogues found in the game.
You had gained monathers from graduate school. Asses is $1,000. Don't do dangerous. Don't serve the devil. Throw the butt casually. It's important to give them loves. The wind lets people feel good. But everybody will pull out. She is my grandson. This is the angry lake. What, don't stare me always.
Crystal in Pokémon HeartGold and SoulSilver. One of the most disappointing aspects of the Gen 4 remakes of Pokémon Gold, Silver and Crystal was the exclusion of Chris, the first female protagonist in the Pokémon games. Nonetheless, it's possible that in the beginning, it was planned for Chris to be a playable character. Within the code of the remakes, a map icon of Chris can be found, suggesting that at some point she might have been considered to appear in the game instead of Lyra. Fleeting SUDOWOODO. It is well known that Pokémon can flee during wild battles, and also by using moves like Roar. However, a funny animation happens if we use the move Roar during our fight with the SUDOWOODO, blocking the road near Goldenrod City. Not too many players knew about this obscure animation, as it's not common to use this move on a Pokémon that we can choose to battle and catch. Anti-piracy measure. In the Gen 2 remakes, the player can be stuck in the game forever thanks to an anti-piracy measure implemented. If the game detects that it's being played on an emulator, when entering a battle, the Pokeballs that indicate how many Pokemon you have on your party will start spinning indefinitely, rendering the rest of the game inaccessible. This of course was worked around to make the ROM completely playable. Golden Balls. The Japanese name for nugget, kin no tama, literally means golden ball, which is also a slang term for testicles. In Pokémon Gold and Silver, the man on Route 2 offering his golden ball to the player is a frequent joke among Japanese fans. The phrase was localized as nugget of wisdom. Obscure messages. There are a couple of obscure messages in these games. Here are some of them. A small poorly documented secret can be found in a house on Route 5. If we stand in front of the door and press A message will pop up saying "House for sale, nobody lives here." Exclusive to Pokémon Crystal, if you go to the Celadon Mansion's uppermost floor and look on the wall next to the stairs, the player will find graffiti to which he or she will add a mustache. Iwata saved Pokémon. Boy, when we were told halfway through development to make Kanto 2, I thought I might just expire on the spot, but I'm glad we made it that way. When we were having trouble fitting all the data in for Gold and Silver, and we were really in a pinch, this amazing guy came along and made a program for us that solved all our problems. He went on to become the amazing president of a real big company soon after that too. This text is spoken by Morimoto in the Game Freak offices on Akala Island. If you happen to have a Pokémon that was transferred from the 3DS Virtual Console version of Pokémon Silver into Pokémon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. This of course refers to Satoru Iwata creating a compression tool for Pokémon Gold and Silver that would allow the Kanto region and many of its elements to make it into the game, changing the course of what those games could have ended up being and playing an important role in the success of the games. Lost House. On the top left corner of Olivine City, there's an inaccessible tile that has a warp point connected to it. If you access it, you will fall into a secret house where an NPC will mention a medicine shop in Necrotic City. But this is inaccurate, as such a shop is in Cianwood City. Since there were several maps that changed over time, maybe it was initially intended to be placed in Necrotic. Blue's Pokémon Collection. When you enter the Viridian City gym, you might think that Blue's gym is made of Lego, but there's a theory saying that there are actually shelves displaying Pokeballs, 224 to be precise. Now, if you take into account the 6 Pokeballs that Blue carries, that makes up 230 Pokeballs, presumably with different species in each of them. This might be close to the 251 Pokemon available in that generation, but if Blue is this amazing trainer, where are the other 21 Pokemon? Well, if we try to make things work a little bit, let's assume that Blue didn't catch any legendary Pokemon, and that he also didn't get any starter Pokemon from the Johto region, nor any unknown as only the main character was able to unlock them. That makes a total of 21 Pokemon that Blue didn't catch, giving us a total of 251 Pokemon. As much as I would love to believe this, I really don't think this is the case, as you also need to consider that Blue didn't get any of the fossils, Eevee, the Pokemon at the Fighting Dojo, or the starter Pokemon you chose. It's not impossible that at some point he got his hands on those Pokemon, but nobody knows for sure. SPACEWORLD 97 Demo. The Pokémon Gold and Silver SPACEWORLD 97 demo is an early build of the game's Pokémon Gold and Silver that was shown at Nintendo SPACEWORLD 97. At the time, the final game was estimated to be about 80% complete, and was set to be released for the original Game Boy. However, due to a variety of delays, including a complete overhaul of the game, it wouldn't be released until late 1999. Up until 2018, little information was known about this demo, due to the majority of the game being locked off from players. Only a few photographs were taken, and most of the information known comes from testimony of attendees. On May 26, 2018, however, ROM files of both the Gold and Silver demos were anonymously posted online, including versions with debug menus, allowing players to explore data that was blocked off at SPACEWORLD. The player begins in his room in a town called Silent Hill with a random starter in the player's party. One of the first noticeable things is that besides Chikorita, the other two Pokemon, Honoguma and Kurusu, never made it into the game and were replaced by Cyndaquil and Totodile respectively. One of the most important elements of this beta is the Pokemon themselves, as, besides the creatures we're familiar with, there are variations of what we ended up having or completely different Pokemon that never saw the light of day. Take a look at them. Prototype Shiny Pokemon. Prototype Shiny Pokemon were programmed into the SPACEWORLD 97 demo. They had no special star animation when sent out. Due to technical limitations caused by the Super Game Boy's hardware, each color palette also had an assigned shiny palette. Thus, all Pokemon with a given color palette also had the same shiny palette. They had a chance of 1.9% of being found. SPACEWORLD 99 demo. Compiled on August 17, 1999, this prototype was shown at SPACEWORLD 1999. Compared to its 1997 counterpart, the general structure is almost identical to the one seen in the final games. While the Pokédex is starting to match the one seen in the final games, there are still plenty of unusual differences to note. Let's take a look at the different Pokémon available at the time. April 2020 leak. In April 2020, a leaked copy of the source code of Pokémon Gold and Silver was released on the internet. The source code was found to contain a sea of pre-release material detailing the development of Generation 2. But here are basically all the sprites I found of Pokémon that weren't seen in the previous leaks. Thank you so much for the support to my last Pokemon Iceberg video. There will be more Pokemon Icebergs to come, so subscribe and give this video a thumbs up for more content. See you in the next one.